Well, Prime Minister Modi is all set to chair the SCO summit on Tuesday, the 4th of July. India assumed the rotating chairmanship of the SCO after the Samarkand summit in September last year, hosted by Uzbekistan. The 22nd edition of the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation summit is being held in a virtual mode. Earlier, it was widely reported that the meeting would take place in New Delhi, and it could have seen the physical presence of Russian President Vladimir Putin, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, amongst others. But about a month ago, in a surprise announcement, India said that the SCO summit would take place in the virtual format on account of a multitude of factors and the totality of various factors. No details of these factors were offered. However, many believe this may be a win-win for all, as it would have been difficult for Putin to travel amidst the Ukraine war, not to mention the recent aborted mutiny that has emerged as the biggest challenge to his authority in decades. Xi Jinping would have had to travel to Delhi twice, first for the SCO summit and then again for the G20 summit in September this year. As for Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, he may be only too happy about not having to travel to Delhi, given the strained ties between India and Pakistan over the issue of terror and the multiple political and economic challenges the Sharif government faces at home. The leaders will join Prime Minister Modi virtually, though. The 8-member SCO grouping has had many physical meetings in India this year, with the defense and foreign ministers of the member countries in attendance. In addition to India, China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are the member states of the SCO. Iran, Belarus and Mongolia have been invited as observer states. Iran will officially become an SCO member tomorrow. Turkmenistan has been invited as the guest of the chair. Also on the list of invitees are the heads of 6 international and regional organizations, including the United Nations and ASEAN, as well as the heads of the 2 SCO bodies, the SCO Secretariat and the SCO RATS, that's Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. The fight against terrorism is expected to be the primary focus of the summit. India has named the summit towards a secure SCO. SECURE, an acronym coined by Prime Minister Modi at the 2018 summit, stands for security, economy and trade, connectivity, unity, respect and sovereignty, and territorial integrity, as well as environment. The Indian government is hoping to end its presidency of this Eurasian group with a consensus in the form of a joint statement that will address issues related to counter-terrorism, de-radicalization, connectivity, Afghanistan, energy, the need for improvement in the architecture of global governance, disruption in global supply chains, and food and energy crises. Remember, the biggest takeaway from the last SCO summit was Prime Minister Narendra Modi's public advice to Putin when he said this wasn't the era of war. Just last Friday, Prime Minister Modi reiterated his call for dialogue and diplomacy to find a solution to the Ukraine conflict when he spoke to the Russian president on the phone. So what can we expect from this SCO summit that is going to take place tomorrow? Ambassador Manju Seth, let me start with you. Before we get into the details of the issues that are likely to dominate this summit and what the key takeaways might be, what do you make of the fact that this summit is being held in a virtual mode? And many observers have pointed out that this may well be a win-win situation for all, given that Putin, Xi Jinping and Shehbaz Sharif would have all faced complexities, let's say, in traveling to India for multiple reasons.
Absolutely, and there will be many challenges, I think, even for India to manage all this. And there will be another summit shortly in September, the G20 summit. So, it becomes difficult for the heads of governments and state to travel so often. And for India also, though of course we originally had planned this to be an in-person summit, I think, as you mentioned, various complexities have arisen in different countries. It may have been difficult for them to travel at this point of time. And I think there are challenges for India and in our relationship with China, with Pakistan. And I think this is the best solution to have a virtual summit where all the heads of government and state can meet and talk and iron out whatever is possible, whatever issues are there on the table and which are very, very focused as India has put it on the table, what we would be focusing on, especially, anti-terror. and terror. So I think that is an important thing from our side. And if you go, look at the previous meetings and talking of the future, all that will be discussed at this virtual meeting, and we hope that there will be consensus and we will be able to bring out a joint statement at the end of this summit.
Let's certainly hope that there will be a consensus and a joint statement at the end of the summit, something that has been eluding the G20 summit since last year, and that is expected to be repeated later this year in September as well. But keeping the focus on the SCO summit for now, Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, of course, Ambassador Manju Seth is right in pointing out that terrorism is likely to be in sharp focus during this summit, and we'll dwell on that in detail in just a moment. But before that, what do you make of the fact that Prime Minister Modi, President Xi Jinping, President Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif will all come together on a single platform, even if in a virtual format? What are your expectations from this particular SCO summit?
You know, it's going to be, Neha, it's going to be a single session summit. It's going to be about two and a half hours. Yeah. So I think basically it's going to be that all the 8 leaders, member countries of the SCO, they are going to read out their prepared text, prepared statements. And of course, they will speak on, the situation, the circumstances around the world, what is happening as far as, the geopolitical flux that is taking place, the uncertainty that has come as a result of the conflict, the food shortages, the fuel shortages, the supply chain disruptions, fertilizer shortages, and so on and so forth. So I think all of them are going to be speaking out. I would hope and expect that the statements, the declarations that are to be adopted by the leaders, that they have been finalized, whatever might have been the outstanding issues that they have been taken up to the higher level, to the level of the minister or the level of the head of state or government, and all those issues have been sorted out. So tomorrow we are going to see the adoption of the New Delhi Declaration, the SCO Declaration. And as at the end of the foreign ministers meeting in early May, what Dr. Jaishankar has said, that we are also going to propose 4 additional documents, one on de-radicalization, a very important issue, particularly related also to dealing with terrorism. Then on millet as, Shri Anna, the divine food, particularly in the context of the shortage of food insecurity in the world that has come about. Then on Mission Life, which this is a call that Prime Minister Modi had given on the sidelines of COP26, and this has been discussed at various fora, particularly also in G20. And the last one on digitization, because that is a very important element in terms of digital payment infrastructures and in terms of improving governance. So what I expect is that there are going to be these declarations that are going to be adopted. There is going to be no possibility of bilaterals, because bilaterals take place when it's an in-person meeting that is taking place, as we saw in the context of, recently G7, on the sidelines of G7 meeting, that there were so many bilaterals that took place. Here also you are showing images of course, the retreat as far as the G20 last year's summit in Bali is concerned. But at this SCO summit, there are going to be no bilaterals. So I don't think there is going to be any sort of, private two-way tete-a-tete between any of the leaders. And that, as has been mentioned, you had mentioned in your opening remarks, that, takes the tension away, because there are a number of relations which are not the very best. The last point I could make here is that, while G20 has seen problems on the issue of Ukraine, but I don't foresee any problems as far as the getting to a final decision declaration here is concerned.
Yeah.
A joint statement is concerned, because we don't have any country from the West. Yet I would expect that it would be a balanced statement. It would not be a criticism of the West, as we have seen in the joint statement between India and the United States during Prime Minister's visit, that it was a balanced statement. It kept on in view the concerns and the position of India. So I think here also it is going to be a balanced statement on even on Ukraine,
Okay.
if it is reflected.
You believe it will be a balanced statement? India, of course, has never been critical of Russia since its invasion of Ukraine, and there is no reason for India to be critical of the West either, when it comes to a joint statement of this nature. And you're right, of course, in pointing out that, since last year, the G20 summit has failed to arrive at a joint communique because there were differences between member states on the issue of the Russia-Ukraine war. Ambassador Sajanhar feels that there should be no such trouble in arriving at a joint declaration at the end of this SCO summit. However, Major General Sudhakarji, if I could come to you, while countries are usually not named in statements that are issued at the end of such summits. But what India has made abundantly clear already going into this virtual SCO summit tomorrow is that terrorism will be in focus. One of the primary issues that is going to be discussed prominently is counter-terrorism and de-radicalization. Now, we've seen, in the past, the attitude of China. Every time, for example, an issue pertaining to the, listing of a Pakistan-based terror organization or a terrorist as a global terrorist comes up at the United Nations, China blocks it. It happened just recently, in support of its friend and ally Pakistan. Pakistan, of course, is the fountainhead of cross-border terrorism that India has been at the receiving end of for decades now. And given that India does plan to focus heavily on the theme of terrorism, how do you think this issue is likely to be tackled during this summit, given that both Shehbaz Sharif and Xi Jinping will be in attendance virtually?
First and foremost thing is, I must compliment you. As always, you come out with a real brilliant narrative and question. And I must I'm really humbled to share the same platform with very esteemed and distinguished senior ambassadors. Both of them, they deserve to have the last say on the subject. And since you have chosen me to comment on terrorism, allow me to just reflect my thought process as I feel the thing should be. Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as per my assessment, has never had any teeth right since its genesis. Joint communique have had no meaning, no substance. It has just been a statement. I'm talking like a soldier, and hence we should not expect too much. But let's not look at this particular summit in isolation. There are many things which have happened in past, say, preceding couple of years. Many things going to happen in the following time frame. So let's join the dots. And rather than going too far behind, let's start from the recent visit of our Honorable Prime Minister to America. I don't think in the history of independent India, a Prime Minister having had such a successful and thumping, I would say, itinerary, wherein the popularity was actually calling it a shot. Whether it is in terms of his popularity or substantive takeaways, which India has had in any kind of deal with USA, has actually become a turning point in the 21st century. Why am I actually underscoring 21st century? Is that this is the same century the entire global order expected to have a liberal kind of a rules-based international order after 1991. And the question that comes up is, are we really having a kind of a liberal rules-based international order? If yes, no questions. If no, why not? So this is one part. Second part is, we are the president of very, very, I would say, leading economies, developing and developed countries of the world today, G20. We need to look at SCO, the ongoing SCO summit, in the backdrop of India's presidency of G20 and its representation and the absence of important stakeholders at various meetings, namely Itanagar and Srinagar. Third and most important point I wish to highlight is what is going to come next. The next that is following is, I think, as per my understanding, our Honorable Prime Minister has been invited to France, and soon thereafter there will be a BRICS meeting, and after the BRICS meeting is going to be a number of other, the G20 is going to culminate sometime in the month of September. In addition to all this, there are many other meetings taking place which have got very significant relevance as far as the global order is concerned. Essentially, the central point for which India is a voice to be heard and respected is the global South. The global South, like previous two eminent speakers and the ambassadors have brought out, the crying need that actually demands to be addressed are the food, fertilizer, and the fuel prices which are going up. Not only in global South, I would say the complete European Union, as also the North America and the Latin America. You look anywhere, it is going on. Next point I wish to highlight is the crisis today in the world is, besides terrorism, is the militarization which is taking place. And also there is a huge challenge that if we do not take substantive step in the global order, the nuclearization is also going in an upswing manner. Therefore, we need to take control. So there are many issues, but let me come to the question that you are asking, terrorism. What is terrorism? Why haven't we been able to define the meaning or the definition of terrorism in the global apex organization in the world today? Is the global apex organization ineffective, or is it failing? Is the League of Nations, after it collapsed in 1940s or late 40s, mid 40s, after having gone in for the UN headquarters, Security Council, and other organizations such as WHO or the World Bank or IMF, etc., has the time come to revisit the very organization? We need to look at it, because our terrorist is actually somebody else's ambassador or a guest of honor. Why is China always and every time blocking? I think the SCO, having said that it doesn't enjoy the teeth or the muscle that it should have, ever since it came into its genesis in 1996, I would say that India is doing a fantastic job by joining the dots in a very benevolent and in a restrained manner. By joining the strength, we are actually articulating our foreign policy in the most effective manner. Here is a platform. It is entirely up to us how we build the narrative and strengthen our resolve to take care or address this threat of the menace of terrorism. Here is a platform that India must take advantage of to call it out loudly, that here is a country which is aspiring to become a global power by 2049. It doesn't understand the meaning of terrorism. It forgets about Xinjiang, what is happening there. It actually very conveniently, skips the activities in the Tibetan plateau, and it blocks one terrorist who has been actually identified to be blocked and blacklisted forever.
You're quite right, sir.
Therefore, Neha, one concluding remark that, if you allow me, I would say, regardless of what happens and how the nation state or the member states take it, India must use the opportunity to call it aloud and flag the point that it's about time that the global order must actually create an architecture, bring people together, and go in to fight this menace at the highest level. Back to you, Neha.
You've raised some very significant points. And, one would be lying if one said that these thoughts haven't crossed one's mind in the context of these multilateral fora that we are talking about on this show today, including the United Nations that you referred to after the failure of the League of Nations.